BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Amy Canavan and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday the 22nd of April.
Dwight Gale has it, Dwight Gale with a chance! Brilliant finish! Dwight Gale picks out the corner. Trevor Carson sprawled on the turf. The ball ends up the far corner of the net. What a performance from him this afternoon.
We take a closer look at the clubs chasing Europe. Plus we check in on a Scot who's on fire abroad.
He's all action, his robustness, he's a machine, isn't he? He's a monster really when it comes to getting about the pitch. He's obviously a big specimen of a boy.
Scott McTominay is having a vintage month in Italy. And
Maida has it now. He goes for a goal and scores again. It's a brilliant finish from Dyson Maida.
after the PFA Scotland Team of the Year was announced, we'll ask our experts who would make theirs.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
And today those experts happen to be the Times Scottish football correspondent Michael Grant and former Rangers and Hibernian midfielder Kevin Thomson. Plenty to discuss, and we'll start with the race for Europe, which became a lot clearer after the Scottish Cup semi-finals at the weekend there, with Celtic defeating St Johnstone. 4 clubs, Hibernian, Dundee United, Aberdeen and St Mirren, are now chasing 3 spots. The Scottish Cup winners earn a spot in the Europa League playoff round, so if Aberdeen upset Celtic at Hampden on the 24th of May, that's straightforward. However, should the holders retain the trophy, the place would go to whoever finishes third in the league. Kevin, it's a position currently occupied by Hibs, third. If they and everyone else really needed any more incentive to go and grab that third spot, this is certainly it, isn't it? It's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, massive. And I think the Highbees will get there, Amy. I think they'll be the team that... Listen, it's hard to predict these next 5 games because obviously they're playing each other. Points can be dropped. You can easily go on a good run. But and listen, everybody thinks the Highbees bubble's going to burst. 17 games unbeaten. They're almost due a defeat. But I think they might do enough to finish third, and it'll be the rest to try and chase them. It's
David Gray is quite openly, Michael, for a wee while, spoke about the need for shift in the squad in the summer. But with the carrot of potential Europa League football, that could quite significantly boost his case in keeping the players that he wants to keep, but also then bringing in the players that he thinks that the club absolutely do need.
Hugely. I mean, if they were to get the guarantee of group stage football, it's lucrative. It's highly lucrative. You've seen that with Aberdeen and Hearts in the last couple of seasons. And also it's a great incentive to players who might be humming and hawing about coming to Hibs, coming to Scottish football. You can say, listen, you're going to be in European football till at least, it could even be into the new year, couldn't it? I'm trying to think of the format, but certainly till the end of the year. So that's massive. I'm inclined to agree with Kevin. I think that Hibs, it's almost a 4-point advantage they've got. They're 3 ahead of United and Aberdeen, but the goal difference is... It's a double figure advantage in goal difference, and these things can be important when you're down to the last 5 games. Everybody's still got to play the old firm. You don't know how that's going to go. Are Celtic going to take the foot off the gas a little bit if the title's won? We don't know how Rangers are going to perform the remaining games when it's effectively dead rubbers. But so I do think that 3 points going on 4 is pretty significant, and that's on top of the fact that Hibs' form has been so outstanding, and I think the Aberdeen's hope is to beat them at Pittodrie on Saturday. That would kind of upset the apple cart a little bit.
It's a massive game already. When the split fixtures were announced, Kevin, that was probably one that everyone really looked at, wasn't it? That Aberdeen Hibs game, as Michael does touch on there, it's probably already the most decisive one.
Yeah, I think so. I think a difficult one for both. You could argue a draw probably keeps everything alive, but obviously a win for Aberdeen would obviously flip that. But I think if the Highbees can get the 3 points, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on everybody else chasing. I have to say, I think Jim Goodwin deserves a massive amount of credit. I think he's done a brilliant job this year. I watched him a lot in the Championship last year, and I didn't think they would be anywhere near as competitive as they have been. I thought they huffed and puffed in the Championship, but I think he's recruited really well and he's done a brilliant job. So listen, I'd like to see everybody be successful, but if I could pick one, hopefully it's the Highbees.
Yeah, as Kevin mentions rightly there, Michael, Dundee United just 3 points behind. They've quietly gone about their business, haven't they, this season? Probably much to the delight of Jim Goodwin. That's sort of all went that little bit under the radar. It would be obviously fantastic for United themselves, but for Jim Goodwin himself, on a personal note, given that there was a fair bit of criticism or a fair bit of noise anyway on the back of his last stint in the Premiership, wasn't there, when it was with Aberdeen, and then obviously not being able to keep United up at the death. But a third or a fourth place finish for him would be a tremendous turnaround.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you could argue it's already been a tremendous season for him and for United, regardless of their final league position, to come up and to be in the top six. And it's looking very likely that they will have European football. Is a really solid. A really solid campaign from Jim Goodwin. As you say, Amy, his reputation took a battering, didn't it? You know, the way things ended at Aberdeen with the Darvel game and the really heavy defeats in Edinburgh. And then, you know, they didn't sail through the Championship with United either. I mean, there was times when there was a lot of pressure on them. They kept kind of stumbling towards the line. And I think he's surprised everybody really, or United have surprised everybody in how well they have done in this debut season back in the top flight, because they've cruised. I mean, they're not always a great sight to watch, but you know they grind out results and they do it really well. And they've won. The interesting thing about this debate especially about Hibs, Aberdeen, and United, is they're all actually going into this post-split games in good form. You know, which is maybe slightly unusual, and maybe that'll come and hit a wall when you're playing tougher games. But Hibs 3 in a row, that great unbeaten record. United have won 3 in a row, I think. Aberdeen have lost 1 in the last 11. You know, so they're all kind of flying. I don't know if you're going to ask about St Mirren, who are technically still in it, but it really is interesting the way the teams are sitting at the moment.
You can't not touch on St Mirren. It would take a monumental collapse elsewhere and a magnificent turnaround, really, from Stephen Robinson. But we're talking about managers there that, you know, Jim Goodwin will very much be in the conversation, I think, for Manager of the Year, as will David Gray. But Stephen Robinson, yet again, probably not a million miles off it, Michael, because only other than Celtic and Rangers, St Mirren, the other team to make the top 6 for 3 seasons consistently. The getting into the top 6 is almost the best that they could have asked for.
Yeah, it is, and you know, you talked about United and Goodwin kind of going under the radar a little bit, and I think that applies to St Mirren as well. And it's credit to the job that he's done there. That, you know, we don't take it for granted that St Mirren are top 6. Of course we don't, but you're not surprised that they are. You know, and you've seen them give bloody noses to so many teams, especially in Paisley. And you know, even if they aren't, they're probably too far adrift to really close the gap. But they could still have a big say in who does get it by beating 1 or 2 of them in that run-in. You know.
What position to be in, Kevin? Getting to be the party poopers. That sort of screams St Mirren, certainly on the last day of the pre-split fixtures. That role of being a bit of a villain would very much suit the buddies.
I think so, and I think the underdog tag that they like, Amy. I think it suits them. They're robust. They can be direct at times. They can be hard to beat. I think Olasanya's been terrific for them. He's a handful. I've watched him live at Ibrox, and when you have that type of player and that presence in the final third, it's a great attribute to have. When you think of Dalby, obviously at United, scoring a goal, Simon Murray scoring goals for Dundee. These players are hard to come by, albeit he's not had the numbers of they two, but I think when you put in individual performances that he's had for a team, and I'm not being disrespectful to St Mirren, but these type of players can be the difference between finishing in the top 6 or finishing in the bottom 6.
Let's have a wee takeaway from domestic matters for a moment or two. It would be remiss of us if we didn't spend a little bit of time topping up a Scotland player having something of a purple patch in the light blue of Napoli. Scott McTominay continuing his cracking debut season in Serie A with 3 goals in his last 2 games for Napoli, and a real crucial one at the weekend against Monza, Michael. A win that puts Napoli level with Inter Milan at the top of Serie A. It is no wonder that the fans are loving him out there as much as they are.
Yeah, to be honest, he's hardly put a foot wrong, Amy, from the moment he joined them, because he said things right at the beginning that really kind of got him into the hearts of the Napoli fans immediately. Talked about getting goosebumps at the thought of joining them, and he was kind of punching the badge and all that sort of stuff, and they really like that sort of stuff. And of course, listen, he's delivered, and he's delivered from the start. I was actually there when he made his home debut for Napoli. They sent me out for him and Gilmour's home debut, and he came off the bench and he scored within about a minute. It was a cup tie against Palermo. They won 5-0. So straight away, the announcer is kind of trying to gee up the fans by saying "oh," and they would chant McTominay. It was immediate, So he's been a hero to them from the start. And as you say, he's now on whatever it is, 9 or 10 goals. I think he's level with Dennis Law's record, isn't he? He's the top scoring Scottish player in Italian football already. It's brilliant, and it's brilliant for us as a country who can enjoy him for the national team.
Yeah, a guy who not so long ago for the national team was playing in the centre of defence. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's 10 goals now this season. Kevin, can you pinpoint what it is about the Italian game or the way that Napoli play that just seems to suit Scott McTominay as much as it does?
To be honest with you, back in the day, you would think the game was obviously a wee bit slower and probably a wee bit more technical, but the Italians have obviously always been renowned for being brilliant defenders and really tough. But normally when I used to watch Italian football, you always just thought about technical ability, but that's not that the Scottish not got that. But I think he's all action, his robustness, he's a machine, isn't he? He's a monster really when it comes to getting about the pitch. He's obviously a big specimen of my boy. He's stands over 6 foot tall. So I just think he's quite unique, and probably players like that, when you think of Lewis Ferguson, really aggressive without the ball, it seems to be people are going over there and doing really well. And it's as Michael mentioned, it's brilliant for us to watch these guys go and do really well. It's a pathway for other players as well to maybe get the opportunity, but ultimately our national team benefit for it.
Yeah, you're saying, Michael, you spent a little bit of time out there at the beginning for Gilmour and for McTominay. The latter already garnering some sort of speculation. I think Inter Milan are already being touted around. That's a club that has also expressed some interest, we believe, in Lewis Ferguson. Just how exciting is that, and how beneficial is that for our game to see those 3 guys being mentioned in that calibre of clubs in that level?
Yeah, it's great because we've had a few years when it's been Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney at Liverpool and Arsenal, and you're thinking, okay, where's it going to go after that? Are we going to? Is that kind of calibre of club not going to be where our players are? And I must admit, when McTominay left Man United, I thought, is it a bit of a step down? Not really. When you look at it this season and the way United have been and the way Napoli have been, you've got United fans pulling their hair out about the sale of McTominay in terms of what he's, the loss that he's been to them. Listen, I think it's great. And I mean, I think that it works in reverse as well, Amy, that Italian coaches and Italian clubs are more likely to look at Scottish talent and think these guys can adapt to this level of this style of football and succeed in it. I mean, if you include everybody, there's at least half a dozen Scots out there, isn't there? And because they're doing so well, I think others will get chances.
Yeah, very exciting times indeed. Let us bring it back to our game, and it's something that always offers up plenty of discourse. The PFA Scotland Premiership Team of the Year was announced on Saturday. League leaders Celtic unsurprisingly dominating it with 7 stars. We'll run through the team piece by piece, section by section, so to speak. But first, thoughts, guys, do you agree with the team? Is there any glaring omissions that we should get to right away, Michael?
Well, do I agree with the team? It's hard to argue against most of them or all of them, to be honest. They've all had terrific seasons, as you'd expect. And I mean, Kevin, I'm sure will tell us he'll have been involved in this kind of voting process to see how the players do it in the PFA Scotland nominations. But the team, Amy, Schmeichel in goal, hard to argue with that. He's got the best defence in the league in front of him, but he's not. I don't think he's a spectacular keeper with Celtic, but he doesn't make mistakes either, really. Back four: Johnston, Carter, Vickers, Suter, and Penrice. Hard to argue against any of them, really. Midfield: Raskin, McGregor, and Hatate, and up front: Nicholas Kuhn, Sam Dalby, and Maeda. The ones I think you could make a case for would be Vaclav Černý at Rangers. I think you can make a case for him. I think you can make a case for Simon Murray, who Kevin mentioned earlier in the podcast, and I think he's a bit like Dalby in that he's been a really he's been prolific in a team that might not make that many chances. I mean, Dundee especially down the wrong end of the table. I think the Cardins at Hibs have been solid. Yeah, James Wilson's had a great season as well, but I wouldn't put him in the team of the year. Listen, I don't think any of the 11 that they've picked are outrageous by any means. I think it's a sensible 11. I'll be interested to see what Kevin's thoughts are on it.
And that is just it, because it is he's got a smile. That, in case you're just listening to this podcast, Kevin smiled there. It is a pod.
Somebody that he's going to say was really awesome.
We're going to get to it. It's a team voted for by the players. Kevin, talk us through. I know it changes a little bit year on year, and it's been a while since you've been involved in the process, but when you are voting in it, do you take like a sort of recency bias on it? I think a lot of the conversation on the back of the team that I've seen has been that there's no Hibs players, and we're talking about the great run that Hibs are on. Is it because of the start of the season that they had? Again, what would sort of be going through players' heads when this sort of process comes around?
I think it's hard to get away from the stars, Amy, whether it be a striker at Celtic that scored loads of goals and it's almost an obvious pick for anyone, or listen, there's a good chance that Celtic will win a treble, so you'd be really disrespectful to their players. Everybody knows how good they are. I was always one that used to pick players that I played against personally, that I thought had good seasons, and they were good competitors, they were good opponents, and I thought they were really good players. So that's how I would always kind of vote as an individual. I never got too hell-bent on thinking of like picking a team that would actually be a good team on paper. It was just sometimes picking the best players. And I think, even though me and Michael have got an opinion, that's why we're on the podcast, no doubt you'll have the same. I think it's a really special accolade when your fellow professionals pick you, a bit like Players Play of the Year. It's not that the fans or the clubs are not important, but I think what's on paper, and Michael's probably I think the Hibs won, not because I'm a Hibby, but I think when you think of the influence that Nicky Cadden had when he come back for injury, my boys are down at East Mains, I'm actually sitting down here at the moment and training, and I watched him do a lot of work on a Saturday morning. Some maybe part of the bomb squad, some part of boys coming back, obviously recovering from injuries, and he put a lot of work in. I think he made a massive influence on the team when you consider I'm out the team when Hibs were struggling. So he would be one that I would make a wee call for. I agree with Michael in the respect to Simon Murray. His team's down the bottom of the league fighting for relegation, so to have the record that he's got as an individual is really impressive. But it's hard to get away from the boys. I think Vlaskas Cherny is one that is possibly his numbers are better in Europe than they have been domestically, which obviously takes him out of the equation. But I certainly think the rest, you could argue that they've almost earned the position in it, I would say.
Amy, it's one of these ones. I think it's the same when it's the football writers vote. Are you voting for who is the best player or who's had the best season? And there is a difference there, I mean, with the best will in the world, Simon Murray, I don't think anybody's going to say he's a better striker than Adam Ida or Cyril Dessers over the course of his career. He isn't. But you could argue he's had a better season as an individual and his contribution at the team. And he's probably not finished scoring yet, by the way. So you know what I mean? It's two different kind of criteria for what you're voting on these ones. And of course, as Kevin says, the players one is different because they've got the personal experience of having played against these guys, and they know exactly, he's really difficult to play against. He asks you real questions on a pitch, for example,
Is it something that you would discuss with your teammates, Kevin, or is it quite a personal thing that you just sort of do on a cold Tuesday night when you're sitting out in a car park?
I think it's a difficult thing, Amy, when you represent the Old Firm. I would say that's the most unique position to be in, because listen, everybody knows the rivalry, but I think you have to be a professional and you have to have humanity and respect and humility as an individual. I'm not so sure everybody's got that. I'm not saying that I'm any different from anyone else, but I know some boys might decide not to fill the forms in. But I certainly think collectively you come to the right answer anyway, because I don't think some of these... I'd argue that the votes are no split by Kevin Thomson filling in the form or no filling in it. So I would suggest that the boys earn the right to be in the team because their fellow professionals picked them there. You would be surprised if you had been in the change room, some of the change rooms that I've been in, who fills the forms in and who doesn't. I'll just say that.
That's interesting. You don't actually think of it. Just null and void, just putting big X's throughout it. The next part will ultimately be who gets Player of the Year. And I think it's probably safe to say the front runner across the board, Daizen Maeda.
Listen, it's hard to get away from it. I think when Kyogo got sold, there's no doubt that his energy, his desire is there for everybody to see. Everybody questioned whether he could be the guy that could score the goals. Did he have the finesse, the finishing touch? He's showed an array of different goals. Listen, his work rate is second to none. I can imagine he's a teammate's dream. The energy that he's got, his counter press, he looks as though he loves playing football, which is refreshing to see, because you should, especially when you represent the big clubs. There's a lot of pressure that comes along with that. That can look different if you're finishing second. He's potentially not been in that case since he's obviously come to Celtic, but he looks like one that under Brendan, I thought he was good under Ange Postecoglou, but I feel as though Brendan's took his game to another level, and the plaudits that he gets, I think, are deservedly so.
Yeah, I would agree. I think everything's pointing it towards it being Maeda. For the Players' Award, it's maybe such a horrible player to play against that nobody will vote for him, because he's given them such an ordeal, But exactly as Kevin says, I mean, he's played most of his time as a winger at Celtic. He's now been moved into the middle, and he's looked a natural there. Rodgers talked to us recently about his quality of his finishing and the kind of range of his finishing. He can score with both feet, he can score headers. We all know about his kind of tireless running and his, the dynamism that he brings to the team. I would imagine, I've got nothing to contradict the belief that he's a kind of model professional. I can't imagine he would give you any hassle as a manager. I mean, he must be a bit of a dream in that respect. You just get a kind of sense around where an award is heading, and to me it seems like it's going to. I think he'll win the main awards on all the kind of the different award groupings that are coming his way.
Yeah, just it's going to be a fascinating run, no matter who ends up getting it and who will all be involved in that category. And just one sort of final question that kind of touched on it earlier, but again, it's bringing a fair bit of conversation. The Manager of the Year. There's a bounty of solid candidates this year, Michael, isn't there? There is Brendan Rodgers, who could win yet another treble. It would be his third, which is a record. Jim Goodwin will be up there, surely. David Gray, John McGlynn, if Falkirk get it done. It's a really intriguing battle again.
Well, I'll show my allegiances here by saying, what if Aberdeen finish third and win the Scottish Cup? Right? Now,
I was just going to say that.
Now, listen, I think that would be an incredible conclusion, because I think Celtic are very, very firm favourites to win the cup. But if that happens, then Tillene is right up in the thinking. And even I would have said, how can you vote for a manager that didn't win a game for 3 months? But it's been that kind of season, isn't it? And I mean, Kevin will have lived this, close to his heart. But I mean, David Gray was on the brink. Or at least it seemed that way on the outside, that David Gray was on the brink in about November time, bottom of the league, October, November, bottom of the league. Hibs put a statement out, if you remember, which was seen as the vote of confidence, and we all went, oh, well, we know where this is heading. Vote of confidence or no vote. He's turned it around like that. So it's been a weird kind of season. Again, it's difficult because you're asking us now, and we don't know how it's going to pan out. We don't know who's going to finish third. We don't know for certain who's going to win the Scottish Cup, whether it's a treble for Rodgers. I think it's either Rodgers or Gray at the moment. And if Hibs finish strongly, I would probably vote for Gray.
Hard to see past your pal, Kev?
Listen, I'd love to see him win it, obviously, Amy, but I kind of agree with Michael. That was the thing that was going through my head, that Jimmy Tillene obviously had the same type of problems that Dave had at the start of the season in that middle block. It was almost unthinkable, the start that they had to then suffer the way they suffered. They've obviously swung it round. I think if Jimmy Tillene finishes third and they win the Scottish Cup, I think it'll be hard for a team out with the old firm to have a better season. So I suppose people would need to put the celebrations on hold as such, but if Brendan Rodgers goes and wins the domestic treble again, albeit I understand people out with the old firm are saying, well, he should be expected to win it. They've got the big budget, they've got the players, etc, etc, etc. But I would also question anyone that winning's a really difficult thing to do. It's a hard thing to do. And until you get put into that cauldron, you have to win all the time to have the mentality. I would never, ever, ever downplay Celtic winning a league, Rangers winning a league, winning trophies, because it's difficult, trust me. But the flip of that is when you're not in that, to have the season that the Hibees have had, and hopefully they're going to finish strongly, to finish third for where they've come from, is an unbelievable turnaround. But then you get a Jim Goodwin bounced up for the Championship, could potentially finish third, had an unbelievable season. So I think there's a lot of people. Stephen Robinson, 3 years in the top 6 at St Mirren, which is incredible. So listen, I would like to see everybody do well, Amy, but unfortunately I didn't get to pick the result or the award, which a lot of people will be happy about because there ain't 6. But I'll be delighted for whoever wins, and I think whoever does will certainly deserve it because they've had real good competitors this year.
A very wide open race indeed. It will be a cracker to see who does get it. But that is all we've got time for. My many thanks go to Michael Grant and Kevin Thomson, and thank you for listening. Remember, we are here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day. So to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Until next time, bye bye.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated,
they said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
It caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.